Hello and welcome to The Home Experience, a podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows available on the home market. I'm Jackson Smith.
And I'm Adam Barnard.
And today we'll be discussing the film Colossal. So we're going to jump in pretty quickly here, but I just wanted to preface this by saying this, more than any other movie I think we've talked about so far, I would very much encourage all you listening to stop this podcast and go and watch right now. I can't guarantee you're going to enjoy it. As we'll talk about later, it's a pretty divisive movie, but it's definitely the kind of movie where it's a lot more interesting and gives you a much fuller experience if you don't know where it's going right off the bat. I think Adam might disagree with me on that. But yeah, so like I said, if you haven't seen it yet, stop this podcast, go and watch it. If you have seen it already, that's great. We're going to play the trailer, and then afterwards we'll get into the discussion.
I just looked at the news, and I think I'm in shock. A giant monster just materialized over Seoul.
That happened like 9 hours ago. You were just hearing about this. What have you been doing all day?
You ever notice how it just keeps destroying everything in its path, but it never looks down? It's like it's being operated by remote control.
Colossal is written and directed by Nacho Vigalondo, awesome name by the way, and stars Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis. It is available to rent or purchase on most platforms. It is available to stream on Hulu with a subscription. So, I am ready for a very interesting discussion because every single word that you just said in the beginning, I disagree with.
So you don't think people should go in blind?
No, well, most things then. This movie seems to be a very polarizing movie, even in the film community. Usually you have maybe general audiences like it, or film fans don't, or critics don't. This just seems like something where there are two camps, and you either loved the unique sense of storytelling and tone and characterization and even ethics of the story, or the other just finds it either obscene, totally insane, totally tone deaf, just, breaking a suspension of disbelief. I found myself in the camp that just couldn't stand this movie, quite frankly, and I went in blind. I didn't really go in with expectations. I knew there was some kind of controversy. I didn't really care because there are plenty of controversial movies that even we've discussed that I've liked fine, or at least have been okay with. And, two movies, for example, that we've discussed that usually are very polarizing are The Last Jedi and The Book of Henry, and both of those I landed smack in the middle. And I try not to be a person of absolutes, but I came into this and I was just, by the end, I had a headache and I hated it. But it's going to be a good discussion because of this, because we disagree on literally everything.
Well, yeah, I mean, this movie was definitely not. I struggle to say not well received, because it did get decent reviews from critics. I think it has an 81.
Got great reviews.
Well, it has an 81. It's not glowing per se, but the user reviews were not kind, and I think it only made back a third of its budget at the box office. But yes, there were several outspoken critics who were very much in favor of this movie and saw it as sort of a possible cultural touchstone that unfortunately really never came to be. A movie critic I follow very regularly, Bob Chipman, Movie Bob is his YouTube handle. I remember he reviewed this movie back when it came out, and I had seen the trailer. I thought it looked kind of interesting. I remember when it premiered at Sundance and there was a lot of hype about it. But, he basically said, he kind of said what I said at the beginning of my review, where he was like, stop what you're doing. Go see this movie. Please don't watch any farther. You need to sort of experience this. And I didn't even hear the rest of the review. I was like, oh, my goodness. Well, clearly I need to go see that. So it was, I went, it was a Saturday afternoon. I went and bought a ticket. But anyway, yeah, I kind of went in not quite knowing what to expect. And I just left this movie just shocked. I had no idea that was the direction it was going to take, and the skill and the subtlety with which I think Nacho Vigalondo, who I'd never heard of before this movie, the skill and subtlety with which he played it all off was astonishing. And yeah, it was one of those movies where I got out of it and all I wanted to do was call every single one of my friends and say, oh my gosh, you have to go see this right away. But it is like Last Jedi, and I realized this upon watching it I think a fourth time for this podcast. It is like Last Jedi in that it is a pill to swallow, and there's a certain point in the movie and a very specific plot point, which we're going to get to later, that if you're not on board with as an audience, and if you haven't sort of accepted as a piece of truth, then you might as well just like turn the movie off. And it sounds like that's kind of the experience that you had, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, the irony of this whole situation, because we're doing a podcast about it, is that once I finished the movie, I thought I never want to have to hear, think, see, or talk about that movie ever again. It's the exact opposite reaction. It's like, I want to erase the last hour and a half and go do the laundry or something. I really just was not a fan, and I will say I do believe that you're right about that one midpoint, because the first half, I'm struggling to figure out how to digest or even rate this movie, because the first half was such an endearing character drama that was also dealing with some heavy subjects like alcoholism and adult relationships and kind of burning out in your early life, quarter life, third life crisis. And like, it was done very well. I want to start to, give the movie credit where it's due. Anne Hathaway's performance here is like transcendent. Like, I know this isn't an Oscar type movie, but like, if she got nominated for an Oscar, I wouldn't say they made a mistake. Like, I would say, yeah, she earned that nomination. I thought that she just carried the whole movie, and most of the parts that I actually did enjoy were because of her, or at least scenes that revolved around her character and how she presented the material. However, about halfway through the movie, something happens, and it just feels like the entire infrastructure of, story logic or the diegesis of the world it's created just completely implodes upon itself and never even gets close to recovering. I wanted to recover. I kept thinking, okay, I've seen movies lose it at their midpoint, and then by the third act, I'm back in the game. And this was one that the third act, I mean, the ending was about as good of an ending as I could expect from this kind of story, but it didn't engage me at all. And like, I don't know. I don't know why. I want to like it more, and that's what hurts. I see something that is truly original, and I just didn't connect with it.
So in this movie, Anne Hathaway plays Gloria, and Gloria is a writer for a magazine in New York who ends up getting laid off for some sketchy things she said in an article, and has, for lack of a better word, kind of flown off the rails. She just got kicked out of her boyfriend's apartment. She's clearly got a serious drinking problem, and she decides to go back to her hometown, which is, I think, in New Hampshire. It's never quite said, but it's a small, sleepy, kind of boring, nothing really happens type town.
It's so boring you don't even know what state it's from, because you don't even
bother
to qualify it. It's just like
some it's like some nondescript New England town.
Exactly.
That because her parents have this house that's been sitting empty, so she just decides to kind of like squat there for a little bit while she gets her life together and learns how to get to her life together. And she sort of hooks back up with this acquaintance of hers from when she was younger. What was his name? Oscar. Yeah, he's played by Jason Sudeikis, and he owns a bar. And gets her a job at a bar, which is clearly not a good idea if you're, struggling with alcoholism. And basically what happens is she works at the bar and they hang out with their kind of deadbeat friends until the wee hours of the morning, where she then has to sort of stumble back home, like still drunk, and sleeps for the entire day. One day this happens, and she turns on the TV to find that there is a giant kaiju monster that has descended upon Seoul, South Korea, and is making the exact same motions that she is making when she stumbles home drunk every night. And there's this very specific playground in their town that she has to walk through to get to her house. And it turns out when she goes through this playground, she, like this monster appears and starts mimicking her motions in real time. So yeah, so it's a very Charlie Kaufman-esque kind of premise, like
Being John Malkovich type.
Exactly, yeah. Like I think that's how it was originally pitched to Anne Hathaway, because she ended up serving as an executive producer as well. Like it's kind of like a more feminist Being John Malkovich, kind of like Being John Malkovich meets Pacific Rim, literally, because it's about a kaiju.
That's really
but
funny.
yeah, I mean the obvious metaphor is obvious. Like she's a very destructive person. She's got a very destructive personality. So obviously her alcoholism is manifesting itself to where when she gets drunk, she becomes this monster which is not really in control of its own actions.
Yeah, well, that scene was really great that you're talking about because, when Anne Hathaway turns on the TV, she's seeing the monster scratch its head in the exact place that she has like a nervous tick or something wrong with her. And then what sells it is that the monster's like holding a cell phone and like pacing around distressed, which is exactly what happened to her in the last scene when she was on the phone with her boyfriend. And it wasn't just like played off as one realization, like, oh, it scratched its head. Like over a course of like one or two scenes, it becomes increasingly clear with a lot of evidence in a really funny way that the monster is somehow very connected to her. And I bought it. And it was actually probably the best parts of the movie was this unique take on personifying an alcoholic's journey in the form of a monster on the other side of the world. But also giving it some kind of grounded realism, which is like she has to be in this certain place in this certain time, and there's some rift in the universe that makes it happen. It's just perfectly sitting between the realm of insanity and plausibility that I'm like, yes, let's do something with this. And I have to say that obviously we're going to discuss this movie chronologically, so I'm not trying to jump ahead too far, but I never necessarily had a problem with the mechanics behind the sci-fi element of this movie. It was the entire... the real fatal flaw of the movie comes with how he handles characters and personalities in the real world. But starting with the first act, I was so on board for like the first 40 minutes with all of this.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that is a testament to how that information is given to you as an audience. Like the way they tease out sort of how this all works and how it all happens is really brilliant directing, quite frankly. Like you sort of see her routine multiple times. You see the paths that she takes through the playground. You see there's this, it happens at 8:05 in the morning, and there's this great sort of visual cue that he uses to tell the audience that this is the time that it's going to happen. And it's when the kids from down the street are all walking to school. So like every time you see the kid, he gets all these long takes where you see the characters in the foreground, and like in the distant background, you see the kids sort of like walking to school. And by the time he sort of sets everything up, you know that when you see the kids walking in the background, it's time for the monster to show up. And that bears some thematic and literal significance later in the movie when it's sort of revealed how this all came about and how it all works. But it's really smart directing, and I think what it does and what it contributes to in the context of the movie is it makes you buy probably one of the most ridiculous movie concepts since Being John Malkovich. Like this is such a strange, random thing that I feel like a lesser movie would play off as a joke. And this movie just takes it completely at face value and just makes it feel so believable.
Yeah, and that's why it worked. That's why I bought it, because the movie was so confident in what it was trying to do that it kind of sits you down and says, I got this. Like, I'm going to handle this. Like, it'll make sense. Just, I do want to not gloss over the stuff with Anne Hathaway apart from sci-fi premise, even in the beginning, because I didn't really love how they set up the first scene. I mean, the first scene isn't very cinematic. It's just like it kind of just happens, and I know you like that, and some people like how scenes start. It's just she walks into her boyfriend's apartment, clearly been out all night, just starts ranting about friends in the most superficial, vapid, and frustrating fashion, and she's clearly drunk, and the boyfriend's going off to work. He has it together. She doesn't. She's kind of, dressed to party. It's a weekday. It's like... it's just a mess. And like I would have, it kind of like, it's very dialogue heavy. It's not much visual storytelling, but it's anchored in such excellent performances that I'm like, I just loved the interpretation that Anne Hathaway took. It wasn't like she was coming in and vomiting. It's just like her head was literally in the clouds. Like she just had no clue, no awareness of herself, no awareness to what she was doing to anyone else. And that's a more realistic interpretation of alcoholism and kind of egomania in a sense, where it's like I'm the center, and when I walk in I have to talk all about me, and I deserve all the time off I need or the partying, and I'm not actually an alcoholic, you know, just complete detachment from reality. But it's played so well performance wise in the beginning. You start to know the character, and the way the movie introduces Jason Sudeikis and other people, and Oscar's character, who obviously had a friendship, a very formidable early friendship with Anne Hathaway in elementary school, and now they're meeting each other again as different people in their 30s. He displays a very strange fixation with her, despite the fact that like it's clear that Anne Hathaway doesn't have her shit together, which I obviously factors in the plot later on. I didn't really get at first, you know what I'm saying? It's like, why is he so jealous? Like, he has it together more than she does. It just came across as a little dissonant. How did you process the character introductions? I want to hear your monologue.
Well, yeah, I really like that you brought up the first scene, because it's not something I've really thought about. I mean, what happens over the course of the scene is, you know, Gloria comes home in the morning to talk to her boyfriend and apologize why she didn't come home earlier that night. And the way she talks is she talks under the assumption that he's automatically going to forgive her for it. Yeah. So that when he kicks her out, it comes completely out of left field. And yeah, it's this brilliant stroke of writing and performance and a marriage between them, because this movie, I think at its core, isn't necessarily about being an alcoholic. It's about being friends with an alcoholic, you know, and sort of like how, and how little things can enable someone, or, you know, spur somebody on, or encourage bad behavior. And what rang so true to me about that performance in that first scene is that she plays it so nonchalant. She plays it like, oh, it's okay, isn't it? Like, we're all just joking here, right? You know, oh, I got a little bit drunk. But her boyfriend's like, no, this is not okay. You know, you need to get your life together. And granted, that, you know, Tim, the boyfriend, isn't the best character in the world. You know, I mean,
right. He's a total asshole.
Yeah, he's a dick. But
you know, the idea that we should sympathize with him because Gloria is you know, a complete wreck is an either or fallacy. It's like they can both be terrible, toxic people in their own right.
Yeah, and this is a terrible, toxic relationship. And it's a toxic relationship, too, because, like, you can tell, you know, up to this point, at least, that he's probably been enabling her a little bit. And so much of that relies on Anne Hathaway's performance. So much of that rests on her shoulders to sort of communicate how this character's been interacting with the world around her. And this, and what's great about this first scene is this is clearly the first time that she's had to actually engage with the fact that she has a problem. You know, it's like the first step of 12 step, I think, is like you have to acknowledge that you have an issue. And this movie is kind of, it's not about her going through the 12 steps, but she definitely goes through some of them over the course of it and learns not only about herself as an alcoholic and how to help herself as an alcoholic, but sort of what happens when you are in a codependent relationship and how toxic that can be and how important it is to keep your friends accountable. So
when he confronts her and basically says you need to pull it together, he almost himself relapses for a few seconds and goes, Gloria, I'm so madly in love with you. It's like, that's not the thing you say to a person that you actually have a problem with. Like, he's basically saying it's all going to be okay. I love you. You know, he's so obsessed with her, really, quite frankly. And he's reached a point where he's still going to be obsessed with her, but he's kicking her out. And it's just, it messes with other people. You either need to, like, actually take a break and say, we're done. We just it doesn't matter what I feel. You're trying to like still hold on. You're trying to attach a few strings to them, saying I'm still in love with you and I'll always be in love, which is basically enabling their bad behavior to say if you screw up again and again and again purposely, I still won't care because I'll be in love with you. And I'm going to jump ahead a bit as the story progresses, and she goes home and has her own side adventure, so to speak, a very dark adventure at times. But her boyfriend comes back in later on, and he's pulling the same crap where he shows up in town. He says, I have a business meeting, and then it turns out it wasn't a business meeting, and now he's picking a fight with her old boyfriend and giving her ultimatums when he really told her to go pull it together and come back to him when she was recovered. And it's just such a mess. Like the fact of the matter is, let's just touch on this. No one in this story is really the hero. No one doesn't have a fatal flaw, and no one doesn't exude their own kind of toxicity. No one is clean.
Well, speaking off of that and kind of the opposite, not opposite, but the sort of mirror reflection of Tim, Gloria's boyfriend is Oscar, who's played by Jason Sudeikis. And yeah, he, in the first half of the movie, and he comes off as this very sort of normal, genuine guy, I think. But upon watching it a couple of times, you sort of see that he is very much an enabler and kind of a scary way, like the fact that he knows that she's got an alcohol problem and offers her a job at a bar, there's this whole thing where he keeps bringing furniture to her house without her asking.
That was weird.
Well, it's because she's clearly in this place where she is trying to get her life together, had to sort of come back here to have this realization. And he's almost kind of like in a nice guy type way, strong arming her into staying. Like every morning, especially weirdly enough, like every morning after the monster attacks, he keeps showing up to her house with more furniture. And it's like, and you can tell her she's always kind of on the verge of saying like,
don't.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm not staying here forever. But she always sort of ends up having to react with, oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I totally needed that. And it's just this weirdly disconcerting thing that took me a couple of times watching it. And also, I'm just going to say this one thing, and then I'll let you speak. Yeah. But it's one thing I picked up on. But thanks, Kanye. There's this one scene where he brings her a couch, and he's like, you said last night that you wanted a futon, and having seen it a couple of times, I remember that exact conversation. And he was the one who said, you need a futon. So he's literally putting words in her mouth so that he doesn't.
She'll be drunk, so she won't remember the conversation properly. So he can gaslight her and say, of course you need it. Of course you said this. Of course you did this. I will say this about his character. At first, he basically takes the nice guy thing too far. At first, it's like you think, maybe he holds a petty grudge. You can tell there was some animosity at some point, but we're older now, he's a business owner. She's been in the city. She at some point had her act together. So it's like you almost think they're reunifying as adults, and have a proper friendship. But the thing is, he takes it too far. Like the first piece of furniture he brings is just like a bed or something. You know what I'm saying? He's helping her.
TV. He brings her a TV, and then it's a bed. And
that's just a TV is like nice. It's like, let me just do something nice for you as an olive branch. The problem is he keeps dropping olive branches and moves on to dropping olive trees on her doorstep, and it's just like, okay, like you're trying to smother me, and there's either some kind of ulterior motive or you're obsessed with me. And even before the quote twist where his character takes a dark turn, you're starting to see him be a little too interested in Anne Hathaway's well-being beyond what should occur between two friends who haven't seen each other in a while.
Yeah, well, it's like there's a healthy way to deal with somebody who's got an issue, and there's a thoroughly unhealthy way to deal with somebody who's got an issue. This movie is a slow burning breadcrumb trail to the midpoint, which I'm going to get to in just a second here. And it slowly plays out how toxic that kind of relationship can be. So at the midpoint, what happens is it's kind of a two-hander. She realizes that, she's killing hundreds of people every night. She's killing hundreds of people every night because she's drunk and needs to get hold of herself. And this is where things get crazy. And this is where I didn't see this coming because it wasn't in the trailer and I had no idea. When Jason Sudeikis walks into the playground, he turns into a giant robot.
Yeah.
So now everybody around the world is seeing a giant monster and a giant robot stumbling into each other every night in South Korea.
And that comes, to clarify though, that comes from them both being at a certain place in their town at a playground at a certain time in the morning. It's not like they can go at any time and show up. It's not like they can decide to open a portal or whatever. It's just there's like a 5-minute window, and it was just pure coincidence that Anne Hathaway discovered it, and then basically she alerts all her friends, and she basically makes them watch a live streams in South Korea while she does a routine that is clearly identifiable that she's the one puppeteering the kaiju or whatever, the monster on the other end. And when when Oscar realizes that he has power, that like her, he can step in at a certain time and become a robot, he decides to use that to blackmail or hold her under duress. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, so this is the point in the movie where the physical stakes become the emotional stakes. After this point in the movie, both of these characters take very, very, very different directions, and there is a massive shift in how they interact with each other and how they interact with the world. So once she realizes this, she's like, this needs to stop. I am going out as the monster. I'm going to write an apology in the ground, and I am never coming back.
Yeah.
She's like, she has decided it's if we're speaking in terms of alcoholism, this is when she goes cold turkey. And literally, it's when she does. Like, she stops drinking. She realizes that her drinking is contributing to this problem. She just stops. And if the movie was about that, like if the movie was just about a person overcoming their personal alcoholism, it would have stopped there. But it isn't, because what happens after that is, Oscar completely flies off the rails.
Within a scene, we got to be clear. He's the good guy, and he even helps her write the apology. He helps get a translation so that she can go in another language, in Korean, write, I'm sorry, it won't happen again. It was an accident on the ground as the monster.
In Korea,
the very next day, I think it is, she comes to she sees the robot on TV and she comes to the playground, and Oscar's just messing around for the fun of it. He's seeing it as a prank. He's laughing with his drinking buddies as he knocks over buildings or ostensibly kills people, or at least destroys a part of a city. And the cognitive disconnect that someone has to have to do that is so thoroughly light years beyond the kind of cognitive dissonance or manipulation that we've seen already, which is mild. Like, he's bringing her one too many pieces of furniture. He's like a cat who brings his owner's dead rats. You know what I'm saying? He offers it at the doorstep and looks up at you. It's like, oh, love me. Like, it's weird, but it's not like I'm going to destroy an entire city and be a mass murderer weird because I want to mess around with my friends and get a laugh. Like, that level of disconnect and psycho, I don't know the word. It's so beyond what that character was possibly planted to be. Like, yes, if you say that character was made to be the villain of the second half or made to be the antagonist of the second half, I would say, his behavior's a little off. Maybe he gets a little too arrogant, gets too involved in her life. But God, a mass murderer who doesn't even care and doesn't show any kind of regret or empathy and then his alcoholism flies off the deep end, which we never saw at all in the first half. Like, how does that at all obey even the most thin regulations of story logic?
I want to clarify a couple things because you're missing a couple key details and making a couple plot mistakes. First of all, he doesn't become a mass murderer in that scene. Him and her over the course of the second half of the movie really start butting heads to the point where they start fighting each other on the playground, and everybody else in the world sees it as a Pacific Rim. But that doesn't quite happen right off the bat.
He does knock over a building, doesn't he? Doesn't like he trashes a building. No, could be people inside.
He comes. There's two things that happen around that point. So first of all, and this is very, very important, she sleeps with another friend of his. This is something that is very much planted earlier in the movie. You know, Oscar he's very quote unquote protective of her, and there's this, you know, cute younger guy in the friend circle who's a total idiot, but who she's kind of taken a liking to, probably because he's a total idiot.
I don't know. He's basically he's her age, like he's younger than her even, I think. Like, and he's kind of try to be respectful, but he's the idiot pretty boy. Like he's the kid with a nice face who also is nice on a surface level, but seemingly extremely selfish and out to lunch. And like, again, the fact that she slept with him was such a red flag as to the stability of her character, because she's getting stuff together and she knows that if she has sex with someone else in the friend circle, it's going to cause issues. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's uncomfortable. It's just a foolish decision. It's so short-sighted. It's about instantaneous gratification, and she's kind of, you know, it doesn't line up with her mission to get her life together. It's creating attachments that don't need to be there. It's you know, supposedly she has a job and she would want to keep the dynamics healthy, at least somewhat healthy, and this is an act of self-sabotage that is in line with alcoholics who are struggling to get their stuff together.
You know what, though? I don't agree with that.
All right, so why not?
Because it's not her responsibility. Like her Oscar being jealous and going off the rails because she doesn't want to sleep with him and wants to sleep with his friend, which is exactly what happens, is not her responsibility.
That's not what I based it on, though. I based it on her as a personal decision that she makes. It's not what is Oscar going to think. It's that is forming a romantic attraction with someone, you know, working a drinking circle in a bar that I shouldn't be in, that I shouldn't be working in, that I'm only here to basically pay the very bottom line of bills. It's not a smart decision. She's not even broken up with her boyfriend yet. I mean, come on. It doesn't have to do with, oh, what retribution will I get for sleeping with it. It's just a common sense thing to keep the least amount of attachments possible in a place and in a social circle that she shouldn't really stay in very long, and she wasn't planning to. I mean, seriously.
I get that, but I mean, here's the thing. Like, that relationship never read to me as, oh, I'm forming an attachment to this guy. Like, she's not really forming an attachment to anybody. I mean, she's friends with Oscar. She's friends with Oscar, and, you know, like is friends with him, and maybe is clearly frustrated by aspects of his personality. This guy, this younger guy, she wants to sleep with him. Like, that's it. Like, I never got that she wanted to form some kind of like attachment, and that was supposed to be anything more than just like casual sex. But what Oscar views it as, and why it's important, is that he can't stand the fact that after all he's done for her, after all the furniture he's brought her, and after all the nice things he's done for her, that she would rather sleep with somebody else than him. And yeah, he spirals fast, and he spirals very fast. And he really does become the villain. And it does become about her realizing that, you know, he is a genuinely toxic person, and that, you know, he's on a journey that she can't help no matter how hard she tries. And she does try, you know, but, you know, that he is, you know, he can't stand the fact that she has, you know, more power than him. He can't stand the fact that she, you know, doesn't want to sleep with him. And yeah, it drives him off the rails. And if that's not something you're on board with, then yeah, it's the
level of insanity of a Bond villain, you know, with like the mass murder. Not this was established as a very intimate story, even with the introduction of the monster, and then it becomes about his insanity isn't just related, I believe, to the jealousy. He doesn't really bring up the fact that they slept together. They don't even verbally acknowledge it. When she begs him to stop whatever, he starts threatening her. He basically says, if you don't do everything I say, I'm going to go.
You don't stay here. If you don't, because she keeps trying to leave too. And it's like, if you don't stay here, I'm going to go out and destroy more.
It's textbook emotional abuse, and in real life, obviously, you know, teleporting monsters don't exist, but like people will say, you know, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to pull the rug out from under you if you don't stay with me. And it does happen in real life, and it's very chilling because people will literally imprison other people in terms of this is basically what this is doing is it's serving as a metaphor for what actually happens more frequently in real life. Again, the level to which he takes it and the fact that they don't even address why he's angry, and he basically achieves what he needs to get, quote, retribution, to be seen what is fair. You know, he basically says, you got to do this, you got to stay here. And then he just keeps going and going and going. You know, the logical thing would be to what a normal person might do who's not a textbook psychopath is get drunk, go off the deep end, blackmail her, and then the next day take all of it back and say, I that's the worst part of myself and it'll never happen again. And in a way, he does do that. At some point, you know, you pass the halfway point, he sends the young guy who she slept with to go and apologize, which is already the first sign that something's wrong, that he's not apologizing himself. And basically she goes to his house and he says, I'm terribly sorry, I don't know what overtook me. And then you know, the next scene he does it again, but even worse. And it doesn't seem like a realistic fallout. And again, I would argue that it's not about the fact that she slept with his friend. It's like he was kind of waiting to flip the switch and exert total control over her. This isn't about retribution or revenge or jealousy. It's about, like, I want to control you. And he even says to her, my life is awesome now, like yours. Yeah. Which also shows he's delusional because Anne Hathaway's life is not awesome. She's broke. She moved out with her boyfriend. She didn't make it in the city.
Thinks her life is more awesome.
I don't understand what that's why I'm saying it's such a level of disconnect beyond what was planted. How can we at all justify that he thinks her life is awesome? You know, that's such a weird thing to say.
Because, well, I don't know though. Because, like, I mean, I didn't grow up in a small town, so I don't really have this kind of. And I want to talk about the small town element of it because I think that plays into another reason why I like this twist and why I think it works. You know, like, growing up in a small town is you feel very trapped, and she got out. Like, he even says at one point, like, you're the one who got out. And he can't really register that she wasn't successful. Like, he sees her as the one who was able to transcend this, whatever this is. And in this case, it was this crappy little bar town that she escaped from. And, you know, and he couldn't do that. And I think there was a deep level of resentment over that. And also, I want to talk a little bit about, because what it seems like you're having a problem with is the mass murder aspect to this. You know, it's like, it isn't just that he's, you know, hitting her and abusing her. It's that he's going out every morning and stomping on a city.
And he knows it. You know, he knows that it's real. This isn't a prank. This isn't a you know, something on an app. This is real people. This is real life.
Yeah. Well, this is what the movie does that I think is really interesting, because there's this really small scene earlier on where Anne Hathaway is talking about, she's like, oh, it's all happening in South Korea. And he's like, yeah, it's just happening in this one part of South Korea. And she was like, oh, well, that sucks. And he's like, why? And she says, well, it sucks because if it's only happening in the same place, nobody's really going to care. And that line really stuck with me as I was watching the rest of the movie, because I think automatically she has a different perspective on the rest of the world than Oscar does. Yeah. I think she is always thinking about the fact that lives are being lost on the other side of the globe. Like, that is something that is always on her mind and drives her reasoning for doing what she does. And that's something that, honestly, like, I don't think Oscar is thinking about. And that wasn't too much of a logic gap for me, because I think that's how people view things that go on other corners of the world a lot of times. You know, it's like, oh, well, it's happening over there. Like, true. I don't have to encounter the people of South Korea on a day-to-day basis. So it's like it doesn't hold the same level of reality to him. Like, in his mind, he is just stomping around a playground. You know, I mean, yeah, he logically knows what's happening, but that's not making an emotional connection for him, because I don't think he views the rest of the world in the normal, nuanced way that Gloria is.
Well, the real world equivalent would be like when a monsoon comes in and kills like 10,000 people in Indonesia.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's in the C block of like the 5 o'clock news or like the 8 o'clock news, and it gets like 5 minutes of coverage, and the next day we've forgotten it. I mean, the only reason that this situation is different is because it shows the existence of monsters. You know, we're all aware that monsoons or tsunamis exist, but the fact that a giant, robot or the Pacific Rim is real, like that would make global news and would stay that way, even if it was confined to one town. But yeah, it does, I guess, touch on some kind of lack of cultural awareness. I would have to say that he is the lowest rung of human evolution if he thinks, there's no object permanence. It's like if I can't see it in my immediate surroundings, it doesn't exist and it doesn't matter.
Well, you do have less object permanence too when you're drunk, and he does get very, very, very drunk in the later half of this movie. And that's kind of, I think, speaks to an eternal truth about alcoholism. You really, your way of thinking is very much impaired, and he when she does start sleeping with this guy, and when this all does start to come to light, he does start drinking a lot more. So it didn't feel that illogical for me that he would be doing this.
I actually want to get to the ending because there's a lot to discuss in the ending, and we're running out of time.
Yeah, this movie has a really great ending, in my opinion, because she realizes that Oscar is she's not going to be able to do anything to stop Oscar from
mass murder,
from destroying himself, and by extension destroying South Korea. So she goes to South Korea and finds the exact spot in South Korea where she will become the monster in New Hampshire.
Yeah. So,
which is you don't really see it coming, and yet when it happens, it also makes complete sense.
Certainly.
And she eradicates the problem. She eradicates Oscar, and she saves South Korea, basically, but at great personal cost.
Yeah. I mean, it gets even worse. Like, Oscar nearly burns down his own bar, and her actual boyfriend from the city comes to visit, and he and Oscar square off, and it's a level of drama and opera that's way higher than what we had come to expect. And her going to South Korea, again, credit where credit's due, it makes total sense. Again, like I'm saying, this movie creates its own reality, and when she goes to South Korea and appears on the other end, it makes total sense because it's established that there's some kind of electrical connection. I don't think we touched on that. Basically, there's a quote flashback where Anne Hathaway and Jason Sudeikis' characters are at the park when they're in 4th or 5th grade, and they both get struck by lightning. That's why she has the itch on the top of her head, and that's
how this whole thing started.
And arguably, maybe that's why he's a total psychopath, because he's not right in the head. Well, something was fried.
Yeah, during that scene, it's funny because during that scene, and it's something she struggles to remember the whole movie, is like, what happened when we were kids and when we walked through this park when we were kids?
Yeah.
And you find out that he had like gone off on his own, and she had done like a school project where it was like a diorama of South Korea, and he had sort of like gone off on his own, and in a very 11-year-old boy fashion just like stepped on it and destroyed it. He didn't think she was watching, but she did, and it was clearly this traumatic event for her, and it was this traumatic event that coincided with the lightning striking and made the monster thing happen. But you learn too that Oscar was always this this controlling and abusive person, he was kind of all along this jerk who was sort of beyond saving, which is tragic and sad, because I always like to think that people can be saved, and that people can earn forgiveness. And it's a skeptical movie in regards to that. Like, it doesn't assert that Oscar is able to overcome himself, which is sad. It's a tragic ending that he has to die, but it also shows, but it's also great that she learns this about herself, that she learns this about alcoholism and about abuse, and is sort of able to walk on and move on, becoming a stronger person. So,
well, yeah, and the thing is, basically, she goes to South Korea as Oscar's ostensibly getting ready to destroy the city out of anger and revenge because she left. You know, she snuck out, she got on a plane, she didn't have a confrontation with him. She managed to get out of that town and disobey the ultimatum that she revolted against the ultimatum that he said, you know, you're going to stay and you're going to be my slave, essentially.
Yeah.
And so she goes to South Korea, and she obviously figures it out before the audience does, that there's a chance that she'll be able to influence the United States side of things. And so she picks him up, and you think, okay, she's gonna, you know, this is gonna be his character moment where he negotiates with her, or he comes back down to earth, where he wakes up and he does beg for his life, but she kills him. Like, she appears as a monster on the other end, she picks him up and she just chucks him. And on the Korea side, we see the monster go flying into the ocean, and like
the robot.
The robot. Yeah. This is vigilante justice. Yes, he will kill the city. He will demolish the city and kill thousands of people. So you can justify that it's like kill one life to spare several thousand. But is there any in between? Shouldn't we still hold her accountable for taking a life, even if it was, on speculation, I possibly could have saved several thousand? You know, she's speculating, and she's taking a life of someone who obviously wronged her and should go to jail for abuse, many things, just for hitting her, domestic violence. But if we're trying to make a grounded character drama with a magical twist, should we just carelessly murder him and cue the sappy music? And yes, amazing. Like, if we're gonna ground it in real life issues, taking a life is a real life issue and should have enormous weight in the story, even taking the life of the villain.
I would leave that to the viewer's discretion to decide. I mean, I believe it does come down to whether or not you believe that Oscar is somebody who you as the viewer. I don't mean you, Adam. I just mean you as the viewer, right. You, whoever you is. If you believe Oscar to be, deep down somebody who can be reasoned with, or somebody who can't, and I think the problem that you had with this movie, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you thought that the movie was trying to make Oscar something that you felt that he wasn't, that it implanted this sort of villain role on him without properly telling us that. And I think my experience watching this movie personally was that Oscar exhibited a lot of behavior that I think us as guys, and me specifically as a guy, don't read as toxic right off the bat. But upon watching it several times, and upon, talking to a lot of women and watching it with women, are things that are so present all the time that we're not aware of, that are indicative of really, really genuinely toxic behavior. And that's why I like this movie. And that's why, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 5 stars, is because that rung really true with me. And that was something that I felt really needed to be said. And nobody's really had the courage to say yet. When we think of abusers and when we think of toxic people on film, we always want them to be presented to us as toxic people right off the bat. That makes us comfortable, because we can say, oh, well, that's not me. I don't exhibit any of those. I'm not, I don't stand with a hoodie and rape people in alleys. But like a lot of times, like, this is how actual abusive relationships work. And yeah, you have to get to a point where you have to cut that person off. And if that person is about to destroy South Korea, yeah, you kill them. It was hard for her. It took a toll on her, but I don't think that wasn't one of those things where I felt that shouldn't have happened.
I just realized a parallel I can pull from another movie that I had a similar problem with, which was Nerve, starring Dave Franco and Emma Roberts.
I hated Nerve.
Well, then how I feel.
I didn't hate Nerve, but it's...
Well, the problems you had with Nerve are probably the problems that I had with Colossal, because what happens in the plot of Nerve is that there's this like app game that's like Pokemon Go. Essentially, it's like you have to try different challenges and go, the app will lead you around town in like a real world scavenger hunt and challenge hunt. And basically what happens is it starts making people do more and more ridiculous things. And then you can't get out of the game. And so there's a dark twist to it. And the movie is strong for its first 2 acts. And on the 3rd act, it turns into a Roman Colosseum spectacle where like 10,000 or 1,000 people gather at the edge of a city in an actual Colosseum to watch a death match. And it's like, okay, so the level it took to go from like a dare, like, you know, walk across a crooked ladder in between 2 buildings to, you know, participate in a fight club that's like televised with 5,000 live spectators who are enjoying the murder. Like that kind of level of fantasy versus what we got is such a massive leap that I can't take the 3rd act of Nerve seriously. And I was expecting a grounded, intelligent conclusion to that movie, and it just turns it into a blockbuster spectacle that makes no sense. In a different kind of way, the fact that Jason Sudeikis has this cognitive dissonance, and the fact that she kills him at the end in like a 3rd act of like a Bruce Willis Die Hard type action movie where the villain has to die. You know, we have to kill the villain. There's no possible compromise or grounded solution. It kind of undermines the beauty of those themes, you know, of the depth. And I think what you said was best, though. It is up to the viewer's discretion. And we debated this. I don't think there is a right answer. I feel one way very strongly, but I don't think I'm right necessarily. You know, I think
it's a very subjective movie. Yeah, it deals. You know, it really depends on the baggage that the viewer brings into it.
But even the ethics of the movie are debatable. Like, I don't feel like I have, or even you have, a strong enough case to say yes, she should have died, or yes, she should have killed him, or no, she shouldn't have killed him, or yes, Jason Sudeikis is realistic, or no, he isn't. Again, it's not the fact that he was the toxic character of the villain, it's how far he takes it and how that's just not normal for human behavior, even some of the most reprehensible humans. I feel like, okay, fine, I'll correct myself. Go see this movie. Go watch this movie. Because you're either going to come away and have this experience that is like what Jackson had, and you feel like cinema has been taken to the next level in a kind of storytelling and tone, and the possibility of how a movie can analyze real human life has been taken to the next level, or you'll shut your computer and walk away with a headache and need to go get a coffee and just talk, you know, have a happy conversation and just forget the last 2 hours happened, because this movie got under my skin so truly. And I tried not to bring it to this conversation, but I really dislike this movie. So if I had to give it an emotional rating, I would give it a 1 out of 5, but because like with this podcast, I try to factor in excellence in directing, performance, you know, all the cinematic elements, cinematography, editing, sound design. This movie was so inventive and displayed such an excellence in some of the technical elements, like Nacho Vigalondo's directing and how he uses visual symbolism and motifs, and also how Anne Hathaway brought a realistic but kind of broken performance, and Jason Sudeikis played both the nice guy and the villain with such ease that it's really disturbing. Yeah. I don't know whether Jason Sudeikis is actually a really cool guy or a psychopath.
I'm kind of scared of him now.
Yeah, totally. And that kind of, you know, he's the studio comedy guy. You don't picture him as this psychopath, you know, and the fact that he delivered such a incredible performance, it speaks volumes to the direction. But again, also I feel like the direction is fatally flawed in how it chooses to portray this. So for a final rating, factoring in both my emotional analysis and also the cinematic elements, I'd give it a 2 out of 5.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, people are gonna walk away, and people have walked away feeling very, very different things about it. But I will stand by the fact that I think that is because it is a movie that makes really tough assertions about us, you know, us as humanity, and about how we work. And I think those, and the reason I'm giving it 5 stars is because I think those are things that really need to be said, and they're not things that they're things that are being danced around a lot, but they're not things that are being said very often in Hollywood, probably for this exact reason. And they're things that are never said with this level of ingenuity and creativity and just flat out brilliance.
The premise had potential. Yeah.
This is an essential movie in my mind. And I would strongly recommend everybody go see it. So next week, we're going to be discussing the newest film from famous director Steven Spielberg. It is Ready Player One. This is a movie that is very close to both Adam and I's hearts. Adam, you read the book back when it came out, I think, and you fell in love with this story. I, on the other hand, had a very different experience with it, so it'll be interesting to sort of bring our two different perspectives two different perspectives on it to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the book, just to clarify, I didn't read it when it came out, but I read it a couple years before the movie came out. Actually, as they were packaging the movie, so I got to get excited as I was reading, knowing that this would hit the screen at some point. The book was so transcendent and just cool for me, like in terms of the adventure, where you're sitting in your dimly lit room, but you feel like you're actually in this other world with the characters, you know, while reading a book. And so that also kind of held this movie to a higher standard for me, you know what I'm saying? Because it had to do the impossible. And whereas with I actually got you the book as a gift, but you had to read it after the movie came out. And so that it's perfect because, again, we're coming from two entirely different points, and we're going to hold this movie to different perspectives, and that'll hopefully create a really engaging discussion.
So thank you for joining us this week on The Home Experience. Be sure to check out our other discussions and videos on the Screen Fever channel. I am Jackson.
And I'm Adam.
And we'll see you next time.